Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
ECSI fans, do you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all of your sports books and track all of your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You can also sign up for sportsbooks and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as they're the best account on the platform. Head to the App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire to download the app.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is the Dawg and Desperado Fantasy Football Show, episode 16, Friday, November 17, 2023. Shout out to the gentlemen behind the glass, Joe Shea, Evan Lewis, Cade Horton, Olu, and Bennett. Shout out to our proud sponsorship and partnership with WagerWire. If you have not downloaded the app, please go to Google Play or wherever you download your apps. The logo in our top right corner. Download it. It's free. Get yourself comfortable actually tracking your bets, checking your ROI, window shopping. And they have kind of partnered up with a bunch of good casinos, sports books from all around the globe. Take a look at some of the free promos and wagers there. And if you're looking for a little side cash or hustle for your Christmas holiday season, send an email to affiliates at wagerwire.com. Tell them JD from ECSI sent you. Zach, Travis, and the rest of the team and community will take good care of you. Last Friday, we had a circuit breaker problem here in the ECSI studios. This week, we're back. It's crunch time, so let's see what the Hall of Famer has to say. The one and only Mr. Shawn Childs.
Boy, while you were talking, I stumbled onto Twitter, and the Braves basically gave the White Sox like 5 players for a lefty reliever in the bullpen. Talk about having too much talent on your team, but Jesus. But back to football. Thought that was interesting. But we'll get into baseball. We'll get into baseball over the next couple months. But wow.
Wasn't that was last night? They got Bummer, right?
Yeah. And then they gave up, Soroka's been kind of disappointing, and that Schuster guy kind of struggled, but he's still a lefty with upside. He just has to kind of learn his way in the majors, and Soroka could be better, but he battled injury for 3 years. But hey, what are you going to do? Hey, that's a pretty good deal for the White Sox, even if they fail. They're giving up Ernie Donaldson to pitch 1 inning for, you, me, Chris Ullman, and 2 other guys to fill in. But, I did see a picture of Chris Ullman on Facebook. Isn't
that the quantity versus quality, right? That's the Stu Bunting, I'll offer 6 for Chris Carter, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah, basically the Atlanta Braves accomplished a Yahoo ESPN trade, hit them with volume. Just take these players off our hands, and we need this one guy to get us to beat the Dodgers or something.
It's week 11, Shawn. We talked backstage for a few minutes, and I'm not going to turn this into a peeing contest here. Injuries happen. It's a part of the game. And they brought up the question, well, who is actually healthy in week 11 in the NFL? Burrow, I don't know the severity of his injury. He said something popped there. Obviously, we know Mark Andrews is now done for the season. And Isaiah Lively now takes a step up, and your guy, even Charlie Kohler, maybe he takes a step up. Anyone desperate in deep, long season, season draft NFFCs, they'll probably be available. Charlie Kohler will be at least on the waiver wire. But it's crunch time. You're in a spot now where you're in a high stakes league that this week and next week's it. And injuries do happen. Talk about those leagues. Talk about where you stand, and talk about what do you do in these last 2 weeks. I know you put your best foot forward. It's points, and more points. But do you feel kind of, the last couple of weeks with the bye weeks, the injuries, guys coming back, maybe Justin Jefferson, A-Chain will be back. Maybe they help.
Yeah, those 12-week sprint leagues where you have to get into the championship game to kind of have a chance to win $1 million are really difficult. Get burnt with a quarterback scratch, Burrow slow start, Gibbs misses a couple games, Javonte Williams misses a couple games, you throw in, a Ridley or somebody else that underachieves expectations. You need those couple extra weeks to kind of overcome that stuff to make it. Unfortunately, I would say out of the 14 teams that me and Kimra had drafted together, I mean, maybe 5 make it, which is kind of disappointing. But if you could somehow put together a 200-point week, that number might get to up to 50%, maybe more. But when you're 60 points behind with 2 weeks to go, something really needs to break your way, and you can't have any more players on bye weeks. You need your best players playing. The Jonathan Taylors, the Kamaras are out this week. Even getting to the the postseason, you got week 13, you got the Ravens off, you got Steven Komet's a tight end that I know some of them I have singled on a team where I get in there, I might have a big hole at tight end, and even if you want to gravitate to, like, if you have a Komet team, to Likely, it's the same bye week. You're going to get hurt. You're still going to have to try to pick them up if you can. Or Kohler, I think the Raiders have bye week 13 as one other team, but it was a really kind of a conflict, and it was more so for me for tight ends. But anyway, so you try to make it. I think the 5K league where we have in that format, you get 2 extra weeks, but I think we're in a position where we have the players to kind of make the playoffs and make a run. Just everybody has to kind of stay healthy. So it's difficult. The NFFC and those other formats, and even the FFWC, which actually has the waiver wire, the second one of the week, where you can get like a Likely or a Kohler in that game. If they don't, if they're not on a team and nobody dropped them, you can pick them up. So the people that are like the sharp guys are going to go in and try to get them. And I already looked at it. I know Chris Schinker had a team that he had Mark Andrews, and I have to put a bid in for Likely on that team, but does he have enough money to get him? Do people view him as close enough replacement for Andrews? But you got to take what you can get, and it's kind of a dilemma because that type of tight end to Andrews could have been a difference maker in the championship rounds, and now somebody gets their leg kicked out of him. Same thing that could happen to Keenan Allen, little shoulder injury, not much, but if it develops into something worse, where is he at the end of the season? Gets you a nice run, but nowhere to be found. So this stuff happens every football season, and obviously it seems like it's happening more this year. But just keep on playing and see what happens.
Go back to August. Go back, as you do your write-ups for all the teams, and you always kid me. I wish I read my own write-ups sometimes. And as you're getting into draft season, and again, I know you did a lot of underdogs, DraftKings, RT Sports, leading up to August, to the FFPC, this, that, the other thing, the NFFC, yada, yada, yada. And now we're at the week 11, and I'm just trying to think outside the box. The first round has been littered with injuries. McCaffrey, the number 2 pick in most leagues, stayed healthy. Justin Jefferson obviously did not. And then you just can go all the way down, leading up to the Bijan Robinsons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My point here is if you were in that back end, in most of them, now getting closer to Labor Day, the St. Browns were moving up into the first round. Some people were taking swings at Garrett Wilson, but there's the CD Lambs of the world that for the most part, if you were picking in that 11-12 spot, he was available. Then what you did on the wraparound, did you take a swing if Barkley was here? Did you try to take a Jonathan Taylor? My point there is where you are today. Looking back, obviously CD Lamb is sticking out like a sore thumb. At that 1-2 turn, what if you could do it all over? What would you be looking at?
It's interesting. I didn't have a lot of teams that I picked like 10, 11, and 12, and I didn't do any NFL. I've only did one NFFC. Well, actually, I did an online and a main event. In both of them, I had pick 1 and pick 2. So I didn't have the opportunity to pick in the back. But before I get to talk about that, I think the most important thing in a lot of season we can reflect back is, we see the ADPs of players, and we get caught up in the flow, and we get caught up on guys that we want to move up, we get excited about, and we kind of create their own mistakes. The player that stands out, in this example is that Keenan Allen was probably a late 3rd round pick. And then, he's a proven 100-catch guy. Maybe he doesn't have the touchdowns, and we knew the Chargers were going to throw a bunch of passes. But he, should he have been drafted in front of T. Higgins? Should he have been drafted into the Metcalf? Should he have been drafted in front of Ridley? Should he have been drafted in, whatever couple of running backs? So he was kind of a guy looking back as, he was mispriced. And I could say on the reverse, everybody's excited about Christian Watson and moving him up. In, he had well, and did well the previous year and had success with Rodgers over 4 games, but he still was an unproven player with a young quarterback that we were hoping that would play well. And he's kind of been a major disappointment. And I had that decision actually in the FFWC, which we have the wide receivers go a little early, and he went on the 3-4 turn. So I actually took Deontay Johnson over Watson, which at the time was a bad pick because he missed like 4 or 5 games or whatever, how many games he missed. And then Watson was still on the field. But, Johnson probably was the better play. I wish I had a better option than that at that time. But, that's the kind of stuff fantasy baseball and football need to get better at. Need to look at the flows and find the spots where players are mispriced, proven resume, veteran player that's had success should take priority over somebody that's kind of you're betting on the come, because a floor of a player, what he's done before. So that incoming player or that developing player reach what that guy has already done. So as far as like the CD Lamb, AJ Brown thing, at the back end, we had, even what's his name? Diggs was, pretty far back there too. And, kind of people fought from last year. This year, he floated back. But if you were picking at the back end and you weren't a running back guy, you got rewarded for taking 2 receivers. I know that I have 2 teams in RT Sports that I got Lamb and Brown back to back, or some maybe 10, 11 pick. And those teams are, winning their leagues, and they're going to make the playoffs. Unfortunately, one of those teams, I got Andrews in the 3rd or 4th round somewhere because he kind of slid. And the other team, I probably lost a quarterback where now I'm wheeling out Geno Smith instead of like the, Minnesota, things, but maybe they work out. But, it's so hard to hit on all the pieces, but, picking at the back end, when you look at the standings of the league and you say, all right, I got 1,350 points and this other team has 1,400. And you look at the key players of other teams that are up there, they really probably only hit on 3 or 4 players. They probably had, Lamb, Brown, Hill, maybe one other receiver, and then one good back, and maybe a good quarterback, and then they kind of filled it in, and everybody does. If you have a great team, obviously you're going to hit on more players. But, to get in the playoffs, if you do a good job in your front 4 players and you get your quarterback right, you have the pieces to be competitive, and you just hopefully you can find the complementary running backs, or don't have injuries during the year, in kind of survive. So it's complicated, even thinking about it, because realistically, the difference between winning and losing, especially on some teams, is decision making during the week, and that's when you're setting your lineup, and that's because of the cloudiness of the players that you're choosing from, because your stars aren't performing or you have some injuries.
Shout out to Kenny Magner. He says, the dog and the mayor wonder what the real story with my boy Joe Burrow and his lying head coach, who I'll never believe a word he says ever. And no, it's quite true. I mean, they spotted him in the airport wearing the brace on his hand, and someone tweeted Friday last night and says, well, he's either hurt or he just bowled 2 or 3 games. And I got a good chuckle out of that. I was thinking of you, Shawn, because, that black band that some of the bowlers do wear. I think I got visions of Stan Gibbs actually wearing that. And so I kind of chuckled there. Shawn, I go back to September when we started this show, and I talked about getting burnt on that sizzle last year. Michael Pittman was the guy steaming up the boards to the second round. Gabe Davis at that 3-4 turn, won in a piece of the Buffalo puzzle. I talked early this year that Calvin Ridley was that guy moving up into the second round. And I know you've been high on Gibbs, and Gibbs is obviously coming on like a freight train, especially the last 3 weeks. Montgomery's back, but again, his numbers have been great the last 3 weeks, and you expect the same thing moving forward. You've been on ETN since diapers, and I've been on. He's had a great year as well. So my question to you, and I wanted to follow up on that, was how do you stay away from that sizzle? The Pittmans of the, I'm not the Pittmans, the Ridleys of the world. Every video on Twitter was him breaking ankles and how he was just going to shine. And if you look at the Trevor Lawrence numbers, he's kind of fallen back. He hasn't met expectations. How do you stay away from that?
Yeah, and it just comes down to the comparison of players. And I know Ridley's been really disappointing, and after started the season well, and his catch rate's been really dismal over the last 4 or 5 games. But the thing is that a lot of these things we keep score during the year. I saw somebody put up it was on. I made a comment about it, and I wish I could remember what the player was. But anyways, I made a comment on Twitter or something about somebody kind of struggling where they are and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, it's the state where you are now. It actually was on Bijan Robinson. It's a good example. So Bijan Robinson, really disappointing. He's on pace. Is he a first round bust and where he's going? I'm like, well, my reply was, his story is yet, the rest of his story hasn't been written, and he's still upright. As long as he's still playing, he has a chance to add a couple impact games. And he entered last week. He was, I think the week was there. He still had a chance to be a top 4 running back, and that's not saying much this year because I think the fifth running back is only averaging about 14.5, 15 points. I mean, definitely the top receivers are outscoring the running backs for sure, and that's why they probably get hammered so much. But all it takes is, Robinson had a progression game last night. He got like 20 points or something, or close to it. Maybe he pops in a 35. Maybe he has a Gibbs game. Maybe he puts 2 or 3. What does it take for that guy to there? So we don't want to keep score right now, but you have to be aware that the person's struggling. I know somebody asked me about Ridley. Should I cut him? I'm like, well, you're playing in a shallow league and is a better player. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, that's possible. But in a 20-man roster, that type of player, you sit him down. You don't want to put the best player in the free agent pool because I just showed me a team that you have Najigba starting because of an injury, and you got a ton of running backs. But if Ridley was in the pool, you'd be like, "Oh, this guy's been horrible, but I think he could help me. Maybe I put him on my team." You're excited, right? So as far as like Ridley is, if he ends up, Jacksonville throws the ball better, and he ends up having 2 good games at the end of the year. I'm talking like 8 or 9 catches for 120, 130 yards. Now, does he suddenly become that 85 catch for 1,200 guy? I mean, he's on pace for, say, 66 catches and 900 yards and maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns. But, all it takes is a couple of big games thing. I think he's ranked actually 41st. So he is well below where he is. I don't think he'll get to where, he's a top 12 receiver. But, we're still playing the game. And we don't really keep score or get paid till the end of the year. So you have to kind of keep an open mind and not overplay your hand and bench somebody. I mean, I got Ridley on a bench this week on a team for sure because I have extra running backs and I have good players. I don't want to sit him. I'd like to get a rebound game, and I think the matchup's okay, but the other players are playing better and the other players are performing. So this is what, these are the decisions we all have to make. And it's difficult. But like making, when you have a lot of players look the same and somebody's struggling, it's easy to sit them. I had Brandon Cooks on 4 teams last week, done nothing all year, and he pops. There was no excitement for me to put him in, but now people want to put him in. Who's to say he doesn't do nothing for the next 3 weeks, and those people get burnt, so it's hard.
That is the hardest thing, is when you're wrong on someone. I played this guy for 4 straight weeks. He's done nothing. You bench him and, he pops, out in Houston, CJ Stroud has made it look so easy. It's not fair for how comfortable this guy looks. And Nico Collins banged up. In comes Tank Dell, Noah Brown, filling in beautifully. And I'll now transition to the running back situation where I got Gibbs individually, I got Montgomery individually. I have some teams last week that I wheeled out Gibbs and Montgomery. And now I'm going to ask you this question. A-Chain coming back this week. I have an A-Chain Mozart team. Do you feel comfortable wheeling them both out? I know it depends. That's with Javonte Williams, who is now trending upright. There's some other backs that I do have. Is this a put A-Chain on the bench and wait and see and just wheel out Mozart? Are you comfortable wheeling out 2-headed monsters on teams?
In the right matchup, and if they're a high-scoring team, I think Miami's shown that they can support 2 running backs, and the same as the Lions can support 2 running backs. But there's not many teams in the NFL that can do that. And I know the A-Chain or whatever I have pronounced it, that he is floating around on a couple teams where he's not in the lineup right now. I was waiting for him to get cleared, but it's not a double flex league. It's a league with 3 that you can play 3 running backs, and there's good players. I mean, who does he make sense to put him over Javonte Williams? Well, Javonte Williams is kind of a grinder, needs a touchdown, and will catch some passes, but where the other player is explosive. And Carolina's had given up 2 touchdowns to running backs in multiple games and been bad against running backs. So the matchup really dictates where he is going to be a favorable matchup. And Mostert comes in with a little slight injury. So if you have Mostert and A-Chain, it's almost like you kind of have to protect yourself a little bit, I would think, and play them both if possible. But in your particular team, you already put a guy in, you got 20 points. You're in the clubhouse, so you have room to make a mistake. But if you got them both, Miami's scoring a lot of points at home. Their offense has been pretty good, and it's a really good matchup. So I think that if I have them, I got to get them in there some way, and I got to, like, Javonte Williams might get pushed to the bench, even if it's a decent matchup, and he's trending forward. But I'll make the example for Williams is, he's got 2 touchdowns catching the ball. He does not have a rushing touchdown this year. And you could say that, I think you probably could say that for Singletary last week. Nothing for 7 games. And you bring up the Houston example where he pops and gets 30 rushes, 150 yards, and looks good. But that's a guy he works himself into play this week because he's playing Arizona. That's a favorable matchup. He showed, and I am going to hammer this in because it happens in the daily games, and I really have to incorporate it more into the season long, is that it's all about 2-game winning streaks, or guys that are playing well over short term. If a guy shows something, and he even if his matchup looks okay, and it's not one of those where he busted a 70-yard pass and it won one play for a big game. If he's trending forward and showing something, you got to keep him in mind because you got to play hot players. And it might not be last week, but it might 2 weeks ago, because you saw this week 3 tight ends that did well 2 weeks ago. They all finished in the top this week. So if they're showing something, you put them in. If there's somebody like Brandon Cooks hadn't done much the game before, 1 catch for 9 yards, but he did score a touchdown in back-to-back games, which is maybe a signal as he's looking for the goal line, playing a weaker weaker defense, so he should get a chance. But, did we see it? No. Did the daily game players see it? No. Well, maybe they didn't, but they put him in because he was 4,200 and stacked the Prescott. But if somebody plays well, you put him in. And if somebody's kind of trending down, long as they're not an elite top 20 player, you kind of have to. I think the difference is the top players that are explosive. I don't think we can bench those, because even if they give a short game, they are potential to give a 35 or a 40 or 50. A-Chain, Gibbs, anytime a player that's kind of has some sort of explosion, even Bijan Robinson, if people want to bench him, that guy could at any point hit on a long run, get multiple touchdowns, and be better. So that's the decision. I guess Michael Thomas would be somebody. Like, I played Michael Thomas in a few leagues and sat him in a few leagues, but what was he going to do for me last week? He was going to give me maybe 11 points. Did I have a player that had a lot higher ceiling? So these are all things we have to think about and get better. And ultimately, when we're playing fantasy sports, the way we get better is making better decisions. And it's really easy to forget how to make those decisions, because as long as I've been playing, I make mistakes every week in lineups. But sometimes you make the mistakes for the right reasons. I'm relying on, I'm a play my star player and a consistency player, but that still has to pay off over time. And I have to look at what other people do and try to get better, and the same with you. So that's the nature of the game, and it's interesting, and it's a dynamic that we all face.
Before we jump on to this week's dailies, this is a perfect example. The team that I showed you, Drake London is our third. And I know when you looked at our team, I mean, we had Stevenson off, and we had another running back. I had A-Chain on the bench. We got, 20 from the Gus Bus already. I think that's a Javonte Williams, Mozart, Stevenson, A-Chain team. Drake London's off. That's my number 3, and I hate to even say that. We got Diggs and another good wide receiver. So the team's stacked. It's loaded. We're in the prime time where we have a 1-game lead at 8-2. That was the team that we lost on Monday night with the James Cook 50-yard run that passed us on that last drive, and we had Diggs on that team. So we could have been 9-1 with a 2-game lead with 4 to go. But my point to you is this: is you talked about the high upside versus an Njigba. That what's he going to get you? 3 catches? Does he get you the touchdown? It's a safe, 8, 9, 11-point play. Or do we swing for the fences? This week's darling on the waiver wire with Guyton from the Chargers.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because Guyton, he kind of identified him 2 weeks ago that he was coming back and stuff like that, but didn't gravitate towards him to pick up on the waiver wire because of where he sat on the depth chart. And he was kind of a big play receiver. He scored last week. I think he had six targets. I would think that the Johnson guy kind of for the Chargers played better at last week. So it's kind of like almost like a coin flip, where Njigba is the clean wide receiver 3 against the Rams, who they had success against last year. So I mean, I would think that decision falls more into the coin flip category. And then you could say, well, Green Bay's facing the Chargers, right? The Chargers, they played well. Yes. Herbert played well this week. He played well 2 weeks ago at home against the Bears. But I just wrote about it. In his other 3 or 4 games, I mean, he barely had any touchdowns. His passing yards were brutal, and his completion rate was under 60% in all 4 games. So he's going on the road against a team that's ranked 5th against wide receivers. I think that would be a tougher matchup for Guyton. And earlier in the year, I wrote that the Rams had risk in the deep passing game, and eventually they would get exposed, which got paid off against Dallas. It took a few ways. So I would think that Seattle, where Geno Smith had the progression game a little weak last week, he threw 360 and a couple touchdowns, that they might move the ball better, and the Rams might actually move the ball with Stafford back, and you got Kups, who's been brutal for 3 straight games, but they have there's enough stuff there. So I would probably stick to Njigba because I know what I got there. But there's just so many layers to this kind of decision making that and all it takes is one score and a big play, and it swings it the other way. So, but that's knowing the behind the scenes stuff is challenging. And the other thing, before you're going to make the decision between Jonte Williams and mostly A-Chain, right? And this is probably really important too, and it's more important for the DS target. When you say right now, going into the game, how many touchdowns do you think Miami will score, and how many touchdowns do you think Denver will score? And that will probably answer what, because Miami's the over-under's like higher, but they definitely have a chance to score in the 30s and maybe score 4 or 5 touchdowns, where Denver, the over-under is lower, don't have many rushing touchdowns. They may get 1 pass and 1 receiving, and maybe the third touchdown, if they happen to score it, it's a coin flip. But ultimately, Javonte Williams' chance of scoring 2 touchdowns is pretty limited, considering he hasn't scored a rushing touchdown all year. You don't think he's going to have a 50-yard play. That takes out of the equation, where A-Chain has the chance to hit on a big play, and Miami could have, a lot of chances to score touchdowns, and their matchup favors the running back doing well. So, those are the things. Can the team score more touchdowns when it's really close? You're doing a coin flip between players. Addison and somebody else, and Addison earlier in the year was behind Jefferson. Minnesota is going to score more or throw the ball 40 times compared to, say, Christian Watson. You know what I mean? That could have been a decision. You know what I mean? They haven't established themselves. So who's going to score the most and create this? Who's playing well? Are they playing home? And those are kind of layers to your decision making.
Well, there's 2 names that, one we didn't discuss today, T. Higgins and Christian Watson, that will automatically be lines through. I will not have a share of either one of those next year. Going to the dailies, no Ravens, obviously no Bengals. The 8:20 game, Minnesota and Denver, and of course the Philly Kansas City Super Bowl matchup on Monday night. Those are off the table for you. So as we dissect this week's Millie Maker, week 11, Pittsburgh at Cleveland, a battle of, Kenny Pickett, who I was wrong. I thought he was after the preseason look, knowing his targets, I thought he might make that Big Ben next step up. Obviously, I was wrong there. Deshaun Watson done for the year. In comes a backup there. Arizona and Houston, a 48 over under. Again, Houston, CJ Stroud. I'm assuming Nico's back this week. Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Robert Woods, Dalton Schultz. There, we talked about the Chargers at Green Bay. Here's another intriguing one. Even though the total's low, it's 38, now 37. Giants at Washington. Sam Howell has – and listen, Sam Howell is greater than Mac Jones. I think Sam Howell can start. I think he can be a starter moving forward there. Tennessee at Jacksonville. Jacksonville on a bounce back. Didn't look good, obviously, against the 49ers. Tennessee, not a lot there offensively there. Here's another one for you. Bears and Lions. And I'm going to stop. Bears and Lions, Vegas and Dolphins, Dallas and Carolina. Those are the 1 o'clock slate, Sean. And I wanted to go to Chicago and Detroit. I wanted to go LA, Miami, and even Dallas, Carolina. You use this phrase, game flow. So if you're stacking in these games, it used to be, okay, if I get the quarterback, wide receiver on one side, who am I doing on the other side for that game flow? So those last 3 that I talked about, will you get game flow? Lions 10-point favorites, Dolphins 10-point favorites, Dallas 10-point favorites. 1 o'clock slate. The board is yours. Tell us what you see.
Yeah, it's we saw that last week, with the Chargers in Detroit. I mean, you knew that game had the potential to be high scoring. You knew St. Brown, kind of Allen was kind of quiet, but that game broke right, and you got 2 receivers, and then the Detroit running backs both kind of hit. They were a little higher, but they got undermined by some of the lower Singletary, and I think the Pittsburgh Warren had a good game. So the cheaper running backs came in and filled the box to make these people be able to put Lambs in, put the Dallas stack with Prescott, and I know people had Cook. Cook was on the winning team too, but anyways, as far as a quarterback, I mean, I think that you're looking at salary and who's playing well, and obviously CJ Stroud's coming home playing Arizona. That's a pretty good game. They don't run the ball that great. Singletary had a good game, so he's going to be back in the mix. Brown's coming a little nicked up. I think Schultz comes off of he was a little hamstring thing at the beginning of the week, and they sit out like Wednesday or Tuesday, but he turned into full practice. So I think that. So Stroud is a player that's, going to be more attractive, but his salary is now $7,000. I have him projected for 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. So he's just making so many plays deep downfield. Arizona hasn't given up much. They don't score much on the ground. The team seems like it's trending forward. There's a lot to like in that game. It's just a matter of if he can fit it. The best thing about having Stroud is that his receiving options are all under 6,000 and they're all reasonable, right? But the thing is that this might not be like Brown has 2 big games in a row. So a lot of times they're not going to come in a third time. And if Collins plays, does that be a factor into his role or opportunity? He doesn't have a ton of targets, but he's going, making big plays, but well above his resume. But I think Schultz didn't do much last week. He was 4 for 71, but 2 weeks ago he was 10 for 130 and a touchdown. I think that he kind of fits the connection a little bit better for me if I play Stroud. If I decide to go that way, when I'm doing a single, because I think about it as I start with my mainframe, like whatever lineup I'm going to go with and see what I can fit there. So Stroud's in consideration and the Houston passing attack. But there's, what's the right combination of pieces? And Dell has a great salary as well. So based on production, potential matchup, there's a lot to like there. Kyler Murray should move the ball a little bit on the other side. And does that bring into Brown, the receiver for Arizona, into play as the opposite side? Maybe James Conner. But the other thing is that Houston's best cornerback, I think he came back last week, so that he's a pretty good player. So I think that helps Houston's defense. So Dobbs, to me, for Minnesota, been phenomenal for 3 straight games. 2 with Arizona, 1 with Arizona, 1 off the bench, and 1 starting. Probably averaged over 27 fantasy points. He's $5,700, which really only requires like a 23-point game in DraftKings scoring, which is not that bad considering he's going to get some rushing stuff. And if Jefferson plays, I think if Jefferson plays, I think Dobbs would be my top play, just because now I have a chance to put Jefferson in and put his quarterback, and I save a little bit of money on the hookup, and I know he's going to run it. I don't really care about playing Addison, and I would probably most likely fade Hawkinson because he had such a big workload last week, kind of banged up. They will get him chances and stuff, and he does work close to the line of scrimmage. But I think that they would taper him back just because they can't really lean on and give these guys those physical games. They're going to invite more injuries, kind of something you talked about earlier. So those are the top two that kind of stand out at the top end. But you still have Tours at home. He has Hill. Everybody's the same. This almost falls into the same thing as last week where, the Dallas game is that, the only difference is that in the Dallas game, Pollard looked like he had the good matchup, finally was going to do something, and he doesn't. And Dallas just chucks the ball like crazy, where Miami is proven to have success running the ball. It is a favorable matchup, but they also have 2 dynamic wide receivers, and they can pass the ball, but 2 are typically, I think he's ranked 8th at quarterback. He can get 300 yards. He can get 3 or 4 touchdowns, but most likely he would have to have that game like he did against the Chargers earlier. They have to be losing and have to be chasing. So the game flow isn't ideal. The Raiders have played better than expected, but they've had a favorable schedule for pass schedule this year. And, they're playing with a rookie quarterback. He has to prove that, he can get the ball to Adams and Myers and score touchdowns. And I'm not confident that he can, but Miami has given, New England and a couple other teams have scored against Miami, but they're also winning, 40 to something at home in a big score. So, the Raiders have players that look better and their defense has played better, but I still think Miami kind of has their way, but I will lean towards the run side rather than the pass side, but I can't dismiss. I got to use Hill. He's been screwed me so many times, but no, but so that type of thing, but Hill's in play, but so Tua, Kyler Murray, he's rated okay. His salary's okay. And he ran the ball. I thought he would be a little limited out of the gate. Purdy's got a pretty good matchup, against Tampa. 2 weeks ago we saw Stroud have that big game. He's looked really sharp the last couple of games as far as completion rate, big plays, and stuff like that. And he does have Debo back in the mix. But we've seen Christian McCaffrey be relatively quiet for him. Getting 20 points a game is fine, but he's not like having these, that game he had he could have had 5 touchdowns. He had 4 a few weeks back that he had that 48-point game. But that was identifiable, and it was at home. Goff's got a pretty good matchup, but same thing. They're going to run the ball against the Bears. Fields coming off an injury, and how well will he pass the ball, and how will Chicago score? So I think Goff will get his points. Allen against the Jets, Allen's kind of a fade for me. Just needs to prove it. How one-sided. Prescott, 3 good games. Will he do something on the road? So, that's kind of like the top end about the quarterback. So, any questions or thoughts? Or
Well, I was going to add the fact 2 things. Unfortunately, Minnesota Denver is your 8:20 game, so you cannot use Dobbs or anything over there. So that is
that's my fault.
That is off the board for you. Nope,
All right,
that's fine. Secondly, my Lions Detroit, I had a 10 with a 47, down to 7.5 with a 48.5. So obviously Fields will be a go. Could you try to get cute there? And I know last year this was your big score with Fields to DJ Moore, and then use the Detroit backs as your back and forth there, or you getting too? I know we don't know what Fields is going to look like, but I don't even have his price point of what he is. But is that even a thought possibility for you on Sunday?
Fields is 6,900, but I'd like to see the player in a game playing well. Detroit's defense is decent. They will give up points at times, but I would think that they play all right in this game. I probably wouldn't gravitate towards Fields because I need to see him play, and I'd like to see a progression game, kind of like where we saw Dallas play, good against the Rams. They threw the ball really good against Philly, and then they came home and had they just decided to chuck it against the Giants and had success. So, we're looking for some sort of thing. And when Fields came in last year, he went to New England. He had, I think they beat their Patriots. They played pretty good. And then he went to Dallas, which is a tough matchup, and he looked okay. So that was like the go sign for the next week. He was $5,300. He was at home against Miami. He just played a good defense. He played good the week before. They were on the rise, and his price point was really, really fair. So, you're looking for more of that type of situation rather than the guy climbing off the bench, and needing to prove something, but he did look good a couple of weeks ago when he played against Washington and stuff. It's probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. So there is potential there. But that's, like I said, that's what I kind of think about when I'm looking at this stuff.
The 4:00 game's Tampa at San Fran. It was a 9.5. Now it's up to 12 with a 41.5. There, San Fran coming off the bye week. Trent Williams back, Debo back, and then the debut of Chase Young. Their defense was absolutely dominant. In comes Sam Darnold that not enough people are talking about. He's kind of had, from a fantasy standpoint, an okay year, averaging almost 22, 23 points a game. Has those 2 wide receivers. Very quietly, Rashad White, who's not getting the rushing yards, but now catching the ball, has done well the last few weeks there. Seattle and the Rams, I remember this vividly because Seattle was a 6-point favorite week 1, had a 13-10 lead at the half and didn't show up the second half. The Rams steamboated them. That was the emergence of Puka and company there. Now 1-point favorites with a 46.5. And you talked about the Jets and Bills. Bills 5-5 must win. Just disgusting how they have faltered. James Cook on, fumbles or gets the ball ripped out on the first possession, nowhere to be found the rest of the first quarter. And I was happy because I was going against him in one spot, and he comes back to bite me on that last drive there. Seattle, what are you going to get from the Rams, as you said, coming off the bye? Stafford will be back. You still got Henderson back there. Kupp. You have Puka. Tutu is now faded. The Tutu Atwell play every week is now gone. The Josh Reynolds play every week is now gone. Anything other than maybe the 49ers D that you'd be looking at in that 4 o'clock slate?
I actually think Seattle's kind of sneaky. I think that I'm not going to go there because I don't want to be cute like I was last week. Last week I went to, leaned on, I went to, go against San Francisco, and I went with the Jaguars playing better. The quarterback hasn't had a good game in a while. I used Kirk and the tight end. The prices were fair, so I tried to go there. I thought it'd be a little higher scoring game. San Francisco would score. San Francisco scored. Jacksonville turned the ball over. And, I used a quarterback that was projected like 10th for me, as something where like Goff was the third highest and he was, $400 more. And I liked St. Brown. So, that's just me handicapping the board wrong and making bad decisions. But ultimately, I was trying to get like a Pollard and Mixon in. Both running backs didn't do well. So, look at Mixon this week. He has a bad matchup against the Ravens. No Burrow, or he had Burrow for some of the game, and then he has a good game. So, but last week it just didn't work out, and it ended up being a bad decision. And, Pollard wasn't playing well. He wasn't playing well. Hammer in your head, he wasn't playing well. They're not running the ball good. Why do I got to gravitate to a guy that's not showing something? It's just a bad decision. Lamb's playing well. Why, so just like, stuff that you have to hammer in your head to do better. Who's playing well? But anyways, so like I said, Smith looked a little bit better last week. They can run the ball a little bit. The Rams earlier in the year, like I said, I thought they had risk in their secondary, and the Rams have, Seattle has the receivers to potentially expose that in this matchup. Didn't do it in week 1. Like you said, they struggled in the second half. Probably Seattle, kind of needs the win. They've kind of, I guess their defense has improved. I can't say they overachieved, but there hasn't been the margin of victory where, they kind of separate. As far as Sam Darnold isn't playing for San Francisco though anymore. It's Purdy. I think you said Sam Darnold, but anyways, Purdy's playing well.
I meant to say
Mayfield?
Baker Mayfield on tip. Yes.
Yeah. So, but anyway, with Tampa's, but this is, Tampa doesn't run the ball at all well. And I know that White scored the 2 touchdowns against Houston, but that was an outlier game. San Francisco, should play well against the run. Their secondary is, can be exposed, and they do have a couple of receivers, and I do like how they're using White in space and getting them the ball in the passing game. So, you could see them, scoring a few points and kind of being in the mix. But, ultimately San Francisco scored, 30 points a lot this year. I can't see, Tampa pushing it that high, but, they got all the pieces to be more dynamic on offense. And, Purdy as quarterback, he rarely throws the ball over 30 times. So he's pretty efficient, making some big plays. So it's tough for Ayuk to get a monster game unless they're chasing. Kittle, even though he's had a couple of decent games, his 2 best games, he only had 4 targets. Debo, he's not a workhorse for him. He'll run the ball a little bit, 4 or 5 targets. It's not like a couple of years ago. He still has that talent, and they're willing to give him a couple of rushing things, at least to help his value a little bit. So it's kind of like all those pieces are even. So McCaffrey's the only one I kind of would gravitate to. And that one is just a matter of, can you fit? Evans, doesn't get over 6 catches. Godwin doesn't score. So there's like a lot of those pieces are kind of like, to me, they're not explosive other than say Evans in the right matchup. So, and then the other game is Buffalo. If Buffalo's loses to the Jets, I think Diggs is leaving town, and, unless he gets, a bunch of passes and stuff. His brother was tweeting last week about it, but Diggs is the top fifth receiver in wide receiver scoring, and he's averaging, he's had a great opportunity. It just, sometimes it doesn't line up every week, but Diggs and the Kincaid, for Buffalo, Kincaid's really coming on. He's, kind of really have to be excited about him. He's scored between 15 and 17 points in 4 straight games. I had picked him up in a waiver wire league, believe it or not, and it was a Dallas Goedert team. So, gives me a really good replacement and maybe even a better replacement. So, but he would be consideration based on salary and matchup. The Jets have a lot more risk against a run, but Buffalo will want to throw the ball. But, Allen can't make mistakes.
Final question, and this goes back to the season long. I made the mistake too because your golden rule is get your studs, play your studs. You know, the less decisions you have, the less mistakes you make. Well, one of our other sources that we use for projections, John Hansen at Fantasy Points, good friend, has. I made the mistake on a chain on a waiver wire because I needed a bye week. I picked the guy up. Mr. Hansen has him ranked the number one kicker this week, and that's the Detroit Lion kicker. And of course, I got Mr. Carlson from Vegas as my week-to-week kicker. Just set him, forget him, like Tucker and like a few others. Do I make the dreaded mistake and move the Lion kicker in this week, which will end up probably being 4 extra points and a field goal, or do I just leave Carlson in there?
Two points on this. A, don't look at kicker rankings. And B, play the better kicker. And the other guys had one good game all year, so you might as well just cut the damn bastard so you don't have him as a question mark. Because Carlson's been a top two kicker in the league for 2 years in a row, struggled and they didn't score. But what you're looking for in a kicker is he making field goals? And Carlson is starting to hit that groove, and he does have a big leg that he can hit from 50 yards. So he's trending forward. They're most likely going to stall. I'm sticking with Carlson. You know, I'm not – Detroit kicker is not – he's not even close to like the Dallas rookie kicker that they have this year. He hasn't missed a kick, and he's bombing away. In Dallas obviously scores, and Detroit will score, but there hasn't been a lot of games where Detroit has relied on their kicker. But I know he's got one decent game that came in the off slate. So I don't even know why you have him on the team, but hey, you know, you still have time to cut him and eliminate the decision by cutting him. So having 2 kickers is really difficult, especially if it's a format where you have team kickers where you don't have to even worry about the guy getting hurt. But you do have to pick up a kicker in week 13 because Carlson has the week off. So, but, so that's my advice on your kicker. Don't look at the rankings.
Well, here's again. Usually, every year we do very, very well in kickers. Whether it's Tucker. 2 years ago, we had Carlson, we had McPherson, or we had Butker. So it's set him, forget him. That's it. And you don't cut them on their bye week. You just pick up someone off the scrap heap, and then you move them back in, and you move on. This year, I've had a lot of misses. We have Tucker in a lot of spots, but again, I have Carlson. We were swinging and missing in some spots. I got McPherson. So yesterday, I didn't even know he'd blast the 50-yarder. I didn't even know they were lining up for a kick. And I was like, there's 5 points, because it's almost a touchdown. And then he shanks the 53-yarder. That's 5.3 points you'll never get back. And I've seen so many of those this year. Carlson did it the same. When Cincy played, when Vegas was at home against Green Bay, I think it was the Carlson team, the brothers kicking, and there's Carlson missing a 50, missed a 53-yarder. And you add up those points, Sean, you'll never get them back.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. You need to make it. And McPherson, he did miss that one for 53 yards, but he did hit it good, and it just kept fading left and missed it in the left pole. And, it's not like he barely hit it over the line and it's rolling down, a low line drive or something like my golf swing sometimes. But that's what you're saying. Like when the guy has the chance, he's got to make it. This year, we're seeing Zerline playing for the Jets. When he's lining up for kicks, he's making them. Dallas kicker making them. There's a couple other kickers that are up top when they're, if you have limited chances in a game out of your kicker, and they, like you said, they're giving away. Those are big points. You'd had 10.3 points after 2 kicks by him, and that would have been, the rest was gravy. You got your 10, and anything over that's extra. But that's the dilemma. Kickers are definitely an interesting breed, especially in the fantasy market, and how to go about drafting them and playing them and stuff like that. But I don't like to go to the waiver wire and play the hot kicker of the week. I mean, I kind of want to settle in, and I made the mistake of, and another like you, I had the Dallas kicker on a team. I had to cut him because I had enough money, and it didn't have the right roster spot. I wanted to cut him and then go back on him, and this Maurice Jenkins guy that I've known from the FFWC sitting next to me in the draft, killing the league. I'm, way behind. He's beat me by 250 points, but I've won 6 straight. But he's a Dallas fan. I'm like, he's a guy that I have to compete with. I bid $37. He bid $47. And then what do? I pick up the Seattle kicker. I'm like, he's kind of was a good kicker last year. Pretty good thing. They kind of stall. Gives me like a 3, a 4, and a 6. What do? I cut him. If I go one more week, he gets 22 this week. I would have got paid back, But you're trying to micromanage kickers. You just, if you're going to make decisions with them, you got to be kind of consistent too. And hopefully, like you said, you want the guys that are making them. And you're going to might have an opportunity when Baltimore has a bye week. Somebody might have to. Some people do cut Tucker, but Baltimore. It's not like. Thing, but it's all about having money and position, and somebody else. I've seen a guy bid $169 on a kicker too, or something like that. But it takes out that one decision. I think I had the decision this week of the KC kicker and Carlson, and Carlson has a bye week, so I just stuck with the KC kicker, and he's 18 for 18. But I view Carlson as having a bigger long range leg, and potentially Kansas City hopefully improves and scores more touchdowns, but. Who knew we would have a segment on kickers?
On kickers. No, and going back and drafting, it's simple. Usually by the 10th, 11th round, someone throws out the first defense, and then the brain starts going, all right, at the 12, 13, 14, if you want Tucker, get him. If not, on the way back, there used to be, again, the Carlson, the McPherson, and the Butkers. So when it get all the way back to you, hopefully one of those was left, and you could set them and forget them. And unfortunately, in a couple spots, I wasn't able to get any of those. So I was playing Russian roulette, and my mistake was I even called you up and I asked you about it. The Rams kicker was hot, and I made the mistake. I didn't even get Koo. A lot of times when you don't get any of those guys, go for the dome kickers. And, Lutz gets cut in the Saints. So you got the domes, in Detroit, in the Saints, and in Atlanta. And Koo was good last year. So I hate playing Russian roulette with kickers. I am that guy that will go for Tucker early. I'll give up the positional player in the 12th, 13th round, 14th round, wherever I know I can get them, and then just move on. It's just the way I've played. But I always had those fallbacks, the Butkers, the Carlsons, the McPhersons, and it sucks when you don't have that fallback. And now we just spent 10 minutes on kickers, which is hilarious. But the crawler's been going the whole time, Shawn. Everyone can go find you on Twitter or X at Shawn_Childs. Finding your work on Full-Time Fantasy, and of course at fantasyanalysis.substack.com for 30 cents a day can get your work. But I want you to close to tell them what you have behind the website, not just fantasy football, but what you've been doing in fantasy baseball.
Yeah, we're pretty much, do the projections for football, update them a couple times a week, once on Tuesday, and then come out to either late Tuesday, early Wednesday. You kind of run through the DFS market for the, reports, and do go through a recap of the games and a little bit of waiver wire thing, which I'll only do until like week 14, because once that's over, we can't pick up players. There's no sense for me going through it because we can't add any more players. So give me a little more time to shift my time to baseball. As far as baseball right now, between now and the end of the year, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around it. When I want to get in, 40 to 60 hours of work to get ahead of next year. The football season ends 1 week into the next year, and I get compromised. It gives me really like 6 weeks to do the baseball. And so if I can do any pregame work before it, it'll be helpful. But eventually, when January comes around, I will do the profiles for all 30 teams. Pretty long process, but I'll do well over 600 players. And then at the same time, I will hopefully between now and then go through all the strategy articles. I like to do, put out some videos maybe on YouTube with you to kind of talk about, even building teams in the NFFC and stuff like that. And, because that will have some longevity over year, from year to year and stuff like that. But try to put that stuff even to tie them to articles. But the other thing I'm thinking about is that I usually do the projections at the end, but maybe I should go through all the data points between now and the end of the year and kind of get that out of the way where everybody has a profile and then I can just adjust the playing time to come up with my projections. But it gets me in front of it rather than chasing at the end, because usually I want to do the research first. But to know their home run rates, their ground ball rates, and all this other stuff, I don't need to do the research. It'll be set in stone, and then you just have to put them on the right team and put them in the right batting order, and everything kind of flows together. And then the pitchers are a little different, but that's what I'm thinking about, and that's what I will do for baseball between now and the end of December. And then we kind of flip gears and translate from football to baseball for the beginning of January to the end of March.
Busy time of year as we get closer to the 3-week sprint for you this week and next week, and hopefully you can get a team or two across the threshold into that for the NFFC week 15 through 17. Couple sprints for over 200K in each. So best of luck to everyone watching and listening. Obviously, a shout out to our good friend, Mr. Kenny Magner. Hope you enjoyed the Breeders' Cup, Kenny. Hope you did very, very well there as well. So from myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Investor, from the one and only Mr. Shawn Childs at Shawn_Childs, we wish everyone a great afternoon. Hope you enjoyed the show. Episode 16 already, Shawn. So we'll be doing some baseball ones before you know it. At 3:30, 3 Men in a Box, myself, Quentin Mills, and Matt Grissom talking some NCAA football. And at 5 o'clock, the closing bell with Ron Marmolevsky at Ron A Sports, talking some more football. So everyone, go have a great afternoon, get some lunch, and we'll see you soon.